Okay, hi everyone. I'm Hillary, and I am a pediatric sleep coach. And what that means is I work with families like yours whose kids are not sleeping through the night, have difficulty falling asleep, staying asleep. I work with babies, preschoolers, toddlers, preschoolers, and big kids up to about age 10, 10 to 12, who are having issues with sleep, whether it's middle of the night, early mornings, falling asleep, or all of the above. So what we're going to talk about today is the basics of sleep, how we sleep, which goes a long way to explaining why your kids are still waking up or why they're having difficulty, and understanding how we sleep really helps to work through the whys. I'm going to talk to you about why sleep is so important, because I truly believe with every fiber of my being that one of the best things we can do for our kids is help them become confident and secure in their place of sleep so that they can sleep through the night, get all the rest they need, meet their potential, and be resilient little kids. And I'm going to talk to you about the most important things you need to do for your child's sleep starting tonight. So those are the tips. Those are going to be the take homes of today. But I'm also going to talk to you about how I work with families if you're in a place where you feel like you need support and you need more help. If you feel stuck, if you feel like your issues are really big, if you've been battling this for a long time, if your child has never fallen asleep on their own, constant wakings, all of those bigger issues, I'll talk to you about how I could help you and what to do next if you want to go ahead, and what you should be able to expect from a sleep training program. Okay, so without further ado, let's go right through everything I'm going to share with you today, and there will be lots of time for Q&A at the end. Okay, so like the subtitle there says, my goal with every family is to help you empower your kids so that they can sleep as much as their little bodies need. Not as much as they are able to do until they have that thing that they need to help them get back to sleep, whether it's you lying down beside them, a soother. At this age, probably it's sometimes it's still a bottle or something like that. But whatever the thing is that they need to help them get to sleep and stay asleep, we want to empower them to be able to do it independently so they get all the sleep their bodies need. So this is the part where you could probably tell me a little bit more, but what are the effects of not enough sleep? I'm just going to open this one up here. So the effects of not getting enough sleep on you, it slows our thinking. It makes us more irritable. You probably didn't need me to tell you that. I can give 100 examples of this from personal experience. It decreases our memory. There is actually a real need for deep restorative sleep that only happens, we only get enough deep restorative sleep if we sleep as much as our bodies need, which is usually about 8 straight hours. And without that, we don't get enough deep restorative sleep. So we don't have the opportunity to take all the information we learned during the day and store it in a place where we can retrieve it later in like the brain's little filing system. So that mommy brain thing, if you feel like, I've got a 4-year-old, why do I still have mommy brain? That's why. If you're not sleeping through the night, you're not getting enough sleep, and you literally cannot store all the information you need to in its memory storage place in the filing cabinet of the brain. It can lower our mood and increase our anxiety. That's really important right now because we're all living very bizarre lives. And if you're watching this on a replay, we're recording it during the self-isolation of COVID-19. So not enough sleep is linked to postpartum depression and anxiety very directly. And there's study after study after study will show that. But in general, at any point in our lives or in our child's lives, it doesn't have to be just in the first year postpartum, not enough sleep does lead to depression, or on a milder scale, just lower mood and anxiety. Most of us have some degree of anxiety. I did the big every 2-week grocery shop this morning, and it always kind of brings up my anxiety level because you're trying to keep away from everybody and you're trying not to touch things you don't need to touch, and you're wiping your groceries down with soap and water. And we all have enough anxiety right now. Getting enough sleep turns the volume down on all of that. It's really important. The next point on the effects of not enough sleep on us as parents, I put in question marks because it's a pretty sensitive thing to say, But after working with hundreds of families now, I know that this is true, that we can build up feelings of resentment towards our child, whether it's a little baby that is, has a 3-hour witching hour every night and wakes up every 2 hours to feed back to sleep, or whether it's an 8-year-old that's coming into your room again in the middle of the night again. We don't respond to our kids the way we want to, the way we always imagined we would, if this is the pattern that's happening. And it really does change the relationship we have with our kids. So, if there wasn't already enough reasons to get enough sleep, this is a big one, because this underlies everything else we do as parents and every other way we interact with our child throughout the day. Your child not getting enough sleep affects their behavior. Most of us know that. It affects their ability to regulate their emotions. So in the preschool years, between 2 and 5, this is where they're just learning emotional regulation. And thankfully, schools now are school curriculum. They recognize that emotional regulation is probably the most important thing they need to learn in kindergarten and grade 1. It's actually not their numbers and letters. So school curriculum are actually including a lot of emotion coaching and a lot of emotional intelligence building sorts of curriculum. So emotional regulation is something that starts in the preschool years. And adaptability, that change of activity or change of scene, or now we're going here and it's time to stop this activity and go there, and your child has a complete meltdown. That is tougher for your child to regulate on not enough sleep. Decreases their cognitive performance. This stuff is all research based. I've done a lot of research on the research on children and sleep, and these are the big take homes that come from it. I'm happy to give anyone references if they want, but it decreases a child's cognitive performance, and that's usually one of the studies that I took this information from is for kids age sort of like 5, 6, 7. It can affect it's not here, but in terms of cognitive performance, their language acquisition and retention. So it also increases your child's chance of developing anxiety, particularly around sleep. So if a child does not feel safe and secure in their own place of sleep, like you think about how the relationship we have with our beds, there are times of the day where all I think about is putting my head on a pillow. And I love my bed. And our beds are like a comfortable place and a secure place. And this is something, I developed this probably as a baby, but as a child. And it's really important for a child to develop that sense of security in their own place of sleep, so that going to bed isn't something that provokes anxiety. So how much sleep do we really need? For us, adults, we need 7 to 9 hours. And 7 really is the bare minimum. I, for one, do not do well on 7 hours sleep. It's really important to know how much sleep you need. And usually you'll know that by how much sleep did you get before you had kids on the weekend. So that's how much your body needs, is 7 to 9 hours. Some of us are in the 8 to 9 hours, and it's really, really important to recognize that and to do whatever it takes to get that amount of sleep. And it needs to be consolidated, not broken. And what that means is you put your head on the pillow and you don't consciously lift your head off the pillow for 8 hours. Your sleep is not interrupted. For your children, for a child 2 to 5, and really sort of 2 to 7, 8, or, actually 3 months to 7, 8 years old, they need 11 to 12 hours straight. So their sleep is not broken. Obviously 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 months old, they still need a feed in there, but one feed. If your child is still getting up in the night at 2 and 3 years old and needing a glass of milk, needing a bottle, they do not need calories in the night, and haven't since they were about 6 or 7 months old. Physiologically, their bodies can go 11 to 12 hours without calories. Their bodies need sleep for that amount of time, and it needs to be unbroken. Okay, that's a really, really key part, because broken sleep leads to less of that deep restorative sleep. You get all these light phases of sleep, but not not enough deep restorative sleep that helps store your memories, decreases irritability, increases mood, all of those things that you need the deep restorative sleep for. So how did we get here? How did we get to the point where, and if any of you has a a mother or a mother-in-law who has ever said, I never had a problem getting my kids to sleep. It happened to me. I had mother and mother-in-laws. Like, I had 4 kids and you all just slept one night. We were all put to sleep on our bellies. And, you know, if you've had kids in the last 15 years, we have been not just encouraged, but implored to put our babies to sleep on their bellies, on their backs. The whole Back to Sleep Western World campaign has been one of the most successful public health campaigns ever, because now most moms have like fear of putting their kids to sleep on their bellies when they're babies. But that's actually where a baby learns how to self-soothe from the very beginning, because their hands are all tucked in and they can't do, if it's been a few years for most of you, but you remember that sort of jazz hands reflex. It's called the Moro reflex, but jazz hands is more accurate. It's that startle reflex that wakes a baby up when you're trying to stealth ninja them down into their crib while they're asleep and steal out of there so you can, take a shower or eat something. And your baby wakes up, startles themselves awake, and you have to start all over again. That gets us into habits that sometimes take years to undo. If you don't undo it, a month or two later, those habits can go on for years of your baby, or your child, waking in between sleep cycles. And it'll lead us to the first item on this list is props. It leads us to do things, to intervene, to help our child get back to sleep or to help our child fall asleep, such as soother in the mouth, bottle, rocking, holding. I worked with a family with a 2-year-old who were still swaddling and bouncing their child on a physio ball. They were totally broken. And they were super strong, athletic, yogis and yoga teachers. And they were just falling apart. So props can be anything. A prop can also be lying down beside your child in order for them to fall asleep. If they can't lying down, there's nothing wrong with lying down beside your child and cuddling with them. That's something we should all be doing. But if they need you there and they don't have the skill or the confidence or both to fall asleep on their own, sometimes with you, sometimes without you, then you're a prop. You are a sleep prop. Because we sleep in cycles. We all sleep in cycles. So when we do get our 8 straight hours of sleep, we actually still wake up 5 times. We just don't have a conscious awareness of it in the morning because those wakings are instant. And we almost, unless our partner is snoring, we almost always return to sleep within a second or two. And we don't have an awareness of it in the morning. So we start off in light sleep, we get into deeper sleep, and then we get into that lovely deep restorative sleep. And then we start to come up and we have a few dreams. And before we start the next cycle of light sleep, we have a split-second awakening. We flutter our eyelashes open, and if everything's the same and there's no surprises, we go right back into our next cycle. If a child fell asleep with a prop, soother in their mouth, bottle in their mouth, parent lying down beside them, being in your arms, and then being laid down in their bed crib, it's a surprise. They come to the end of their sleep cycle and they flutter their eyelashes open. They go, whoa, 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 where'd mom go? So it wakes them up fully. They cry out for you, or they get out of their little bed and they come looking for you, and they want to get into your bed, or they want you to come into their bed. And that sort of routine can play out for years. Sometimes it happens when you make too early of a switch to the toddler bed, which is why I put this little kid in. I love this picture because I always encourage the families that I work with to keep their kids in a crib for as long as you can. I just got a message the other day from a mom that I worked with 2 years ago when her child was 19 months and soother dependent to go to sleep. She did great. Started to sleep through the night on her own, no soother within a week. Her speech started exploding because she didn't have a soother anymore, and she was getting more sleep, all of those great things. She emailed me 2 years later and said, we just switched her from crib to toddler bed because we were all going to be home for this, sort of self-quarantine time. We thought, okay, you know what, if we have to go through some work because she's 3.5 and switching from a crib to a toddler bed, which for most families is late, but that's what I choose. And that's what I encourage, is keep them in their crib until at least they're 3, if you can. They're not climbing out and endangering themselves, because the older they are, the cognitively more capable they are of handling the idea of an artificial boundary. So a lot of times families will switch their child from a crib to a toddler bed thinking it will help their sleep. Okay, you know what? They just hate their crib. So I'm going to get them this cool new race car bed and that'll hopefully solve the problem. And it usually makes it worse because if your child doesn't have really solid sleep skills and habits first, this artificial boundary of this open toddler bed they can get out of, they can become like a jack in the box at bedtime and in the middle of the night. So I always encourage families that if your child is still in a crib, and some of you have 2-year-olds that are still in a crib, if your child's still in a crib, work on the sleep first. And if you need help with that, I'm going to talk to you at the end of the webinar about how to do that. Keep them in a crib until their sleep skills are solid, and then switch to a toddler bed. For those of you whose kids are in a bed and are getting out in and out all night and coming into your room, you absolutely can change the behaviors around it. There's just a lot more strategy involved because your child's older, but it still works really, really well. I don't think I finished. This mom that emailed me, she said they didn't have a single issue with switching their child from a crib to a toddler bed. Number one, they solved her sleep issues first. And number two, they waited until she was cognitively mature enough to understand what stay in bed meant. They didn't even have to enforce it because sleep was just such a natural thing for her, that being in a toddler bed was just a cool new thing for her and didn't encourage any behavioral challenges. So some of you are still in the age of wondering whether or not your child needs a nap. So most kids will need to nap until around their 3rd birthday. Sometimes we need to stop them napping a little bit sooner. Some kids can nap a little bit later. It depends on how they're sleeping at night. But if your child is not getting 11 to 12 hours straight, they're probably going to need to nap longer. And unfortunately, what that does past age 3 is it doesn't give them enough awake time between napping and bedtime, and it often makes bedtime more challenging. So here's how you know when your child is ready to stop napping, is if they already have decent sleep, and they usually fall asleep quite easily at between 7 and 7:30 at night, they suddenly have a hard time falling asleep and they're awake until 8, 8:30, 9. That's an indication of when your child is ready to stop napping. And the last point on this list is you'll probably need an earlier bedtime when you first drop the nap. 6:30 is as early as you can go, but sometimes you'll need like a 6:30, 6:45 bedtime if normally they went to bed at 7:30 before when you stop napping. So if your child is fighting the nap and they're 2.5-ish, doesn't mean they don't need it. 2.5 is a real boundary pushing age. And they're also getting older and they probably have a little bit more juice in them to fight the nap. They're not desperate for sleep at noon. The first thing I would do is push it a little bit later and then cap the nap. So you can phase out naps by capping it. If you're like, you know what, my child has a hard time falling asleep at bedtime if they nap. But if they don't nap, they're a train wreck by supper time. And I'm dealing with meltdown after meltdown. That's often the case in that few months of transition. It's never like a clear-cut transition, but in the few months of transition, it can be like that. So what you can do is you can cap the nap. And that means instead of their normal 1.5 to 2 hour nap, you can go in at about half an hour, 40 minutes, open the blinds, turn on the lights, leave the door open, and then start making more noise in the house. So that as soon as they come to the end of their next sleep cycle, which could be at 45 minutes usually, they'll probably wake up naturally. You don't want to wake a toddler up out of or preschooler up out of a deep phase of sleep. You'll have a cranky kid on your hands for the rest of the day, or at least the next hour. What you want to do is just make it conducive for them to wake up after the end of their next sleep cycle. Okay. So you'll know your child is ready to stop napping, not by what happens in the middle of the day, because a lot of times they'll still want to nap, or they're still able to nap. They fall asleep in the car whenever they're out in the middle of the day. But you'll know by what happens at bedtime. If normally they fell asleep between 7, 7:30, and now they're struggling to fall asleep by 8:39, they're ready to drop the nap. So here are some things that you need to do starting tonight if you're not already. Number one, prevent your child from being overtired. So if they're younger than 3, they probably still need to nap. And if they don't know how to do that on their own, if they fight it, that's one of those issues that we might need to talk further about, and we might need to work one-on-one together with. But earlier bedtimes in general are always better. A lot of times parents will push bedtime later in the hopes of their kid falling asleep faster. what happens is they get overtired. And an overtired child, like when I get overtired, I fall asleep in a split second. When a child gets overtired, their nervous systems get wound up so that they're bouncing off the walls, and they look like they're not tired, and they're full of energy. A lot of times I'll have parents that I'm working with tell me that their child is full of energy at 6 or 7 o'clock at night and they can't get them to sleep. But that's their nervous system wired. Okay. Overtired equals wired in a child. So an earlier bedtime is always better. And the ideal bedtime for a child anywhere from, sort of 3 months to age 8 is between 7 and 7:30. You want to keep an idea of 12 hours of day, 12 hours of night, so that daytime is for fun, cuddles, snuggles, food, water, playing, shenanigans, everything between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. But 7 p.m. to 7 a.m., that's nighttime. And there's one thing that we do at nighttime, and that's sleep. I always recommend to my clients to use some sort of okay to wake clock for this age group. Younger than 2.5, it's really, really hard for them to get the idea of it. But some sort of grow clock, or even in adults, those ambient light clocks that rather than make a sound when you want your alarm to go off, it gradually increases the amount of light that appears. Anything that just kind of lights up when it's okay for your child to wake up and get out of their bed and come into your room and pounce on you. In my house, it's 7. We call it Magic 7 because that just sounds cooler for the kid. I had one family say to me, what about Magic 10? How about Magic 10? Can we have Magic 10 in our house? That would be great on the weekends. Program the clock for 10 o'clock and not have your child come in until 10. That'd be all right. At this point, I would be happy with Magic 8. But Magic 7 it is, so that your child's internal body clock gets a real sense of 12 hours of day and 12 hours of night. Another thing you need to do is preempt the one more requests. Okay, so children of this age are really good at pushing for one more story, one more glass of water. I need to go to the potty again. I need to do this. We need one more snuggle, one more hug, one more kiss, one more. So another one of the tips on the next slide, I know it says 5 tips and there's 3. There's another slide. On the next slide, I'll talk about routine. But if you put into the routine, if you build into the routine, last trip to the toilet for the night, last drink of water for the night, last hug, kiss, snuggle for the night, 2 stories, not 3, not 4, 2 stories every single night. And if you don't change it, the more black and white you are about your boundaries with children this age, the easier it is for them to get a grip on it and to stop fighting you on it. If it never changes, they'll stop pushing. So you want to preempt those one more requests. You want to not indulge drama. So sort of the drama at this age can sometimes come around the one more requests, but it's really important to know the difference between a true tantrum and drama. Drama is like a lot of whining and a lot of complaining and a lot of, sort of that sort of behavior. A true tantrum is when really their brain has crossed into the fight or flight mode and their little primitive brains have lit up, and whatever overtiredness, whatever wrinkle in their sock issue has set them off. If it's a true tantrum, then any amount of logic and reason and discipline is not going to help, because they're not using their higher center of their brain. They're using the lower part of their brain, their primitive fight or flight part of their brain that is just, is set off. The best you can do in those situations is sit, breathe deeply yourself with big, long, relaxed exhales so that your own nervous system is calm and you get out of your own fight or flight mode, because your child's brain will pick up on what your brain is doing. There's this interplay between nervous systems that happens. That's not woo-woo stuff. This is actually neuroscience. And their nervous system will pick up on the nervous systems of the people around them. You might notice that if you're really angry, really frustrated, your child kind of mirrors you. It's because we have mirror neurons in our brains. So if you calm your own nervous system, it might turn down the volume or at least shorten the duration of your child's tantrum. Then you comfort them and you go back into your bedtime routine. But if it's just drama, that actually takes discipline and boundaries and routine. So you want your bedtime routine to be pretty much the same every night, kind of Groundhog Day. Change up the books, but 2 books. not 3, not 4, not one more, and don't indulge the one more. If you have been in the past, set a routine. And like when I work with families, I do this whole clip art thing, and there's a few posters that we put in the kids' room to get them to get buy-in, to get them to feel empowered around their own routine, to make them feel like they're in charge, not constantly being dictated to. That's what kids at this age want. So there's a lot of strategies that we put in place for kids this age that the kids love and completely buy into. But in general, you want your routine to be about 40 minutes so that it's not this kind of long drawn out extension of their play. That you want it to be really clear, and a bath to start the routine is a great way to be really clear that, okay, daytime is over and we are moving into nighttime now. And you want it to be really consistent, pretty much the same every night. Finally, you want to make their room a sleep sanctuary. Dull, dark, not a lot of toys. If your child is going to bed with a posse of stuffed animals and chatting with them and talking to them for hours in the middle of the night, that needs to change. Doesn't happen very often, but every now and then with the family, I need to get them to pretty much clear the room of toys to help their child develop the boundaries around sleep, or at least just minimize. And there are some really empowering ways to do this so that you're not taking all their toys away. There are strategies that you can use to help your child get on board with even a change like that. You want to avoid night lights. This is a big one if your child is 4 or 5. Those are the ages when fears start to come up, nightmares, especially if they're exposed to more media. Best thing to do is to limit the media and keep them on Peppa Pig as long as you can, because anything beyond that is so stimulating, and the bad guys and all that stuff starts to come in, and their imaginations are developing. So around 4 and 5, there's a lot more fears that develop. So a lot of times children will want it to be lighter. The reason why you want to avoid it is because light affects the melatonin production in our brains. And that's the chemical that helps our brains fall asleep and stay asleep through the night long enough. Okay. So without enough melatonin, your child either has trouble falling asleep, has trouble staying asleep, or wakes up too early. So their sleep duration isn't long enough. So to help that, we start dimming lights in the house. I mean, it's hard this time of year because it's light out at the time of recording this. It just sends the signal to their brains that it's daytime. So the best way to give your child light so that they can see their surroundings a little bit better is to put a night light in the hall and keep their door cracked open. Okay. Or a bathroom light on down the hall and keep their door cracked open. So that's enough light coming in, but it's not direct light, and it's not tricking their brains into thinking that it's daytime. So if you are having bedtime battles, this is a big reason why families with children your kids' age will call me, is because they're just fighting with their kids every bedtime to fall asleep, or it takes their child forever to fall asleep. A lot of times it's a scheduling issue we have to work on, but most of the time it's behavioral or a combination of the two. So if your child at 2, 3, 4, 5 doesn't have healthy sleep habits at this point, and by that I mean they go to bed between 7 and 7:30, they take 10 to 15 minutes to fall asleep, and you don't hear a peep from them for 11 to 12 hours. That is what every child has it in them to do, honestly. I know you're rolling your eyes and thinking she hasn't met our kid, but I have. I've met several of your kids, probably dozens of your kids, and they all have it in them to do. And it's my favorite age to work with because the reward is so massive. The sleep deprivation has been so long-standing that the changes are huge, and it is awesome. And you get this whole new kid. So it's definitely time to establish healthy sleep, because research also shows that if your child has sleep issues at 2 and 3 and 4, that those sleep issues are very likely to continue. And then don't be the family that just called me last month with a 10-and-a-half-year-old that has never slept through the night. And she's learning to. She just had her first sleep through the night a week ago, and it blew her parents' minds. She's falling asleep without her mom in her bed with her for the first time in 8 years. Her mom is exhausted and is taking medication for anxiety and depression. Don't go down that road. It is definitely time to establish healthy sleep for you and your child. Because if you're getting enough sleep, you get to be the parent that you know you can be and that you want to be. And that sounds like a self-help book title, but it's true. It's really hard to parent with patience and with integrity and with all of the tools you have. You can read every parenting book on the shelf, but if you don't have enough sleep and your sleep is constantly broken and you're resenting your child because of it, and or resenting your child because of it, you just can't use those tools throughout the day. So routine is really important, and boundaries around sleep are really important. One of the first things you need to do is decide as a family that sleep is important in your household and that it is a priority. We die without sleep before we die without food and water. That's how important sleep is to the functioning of our physical bodies. And really important now is it's getting enough sleep is important for our immune systems. If we didn't need another reason to be sleeping well, now we got another one. So really, really important to have a clear boundary around sleep in the family. So preschoolers, their MO, the toddler MO is really about pushing boundaries. That continues into the preschool years, but also what starts to develop around 3, 4 is where do I have power? Trying to determine where they have control in their worlds and how to use that control. That sounds like manipulative. It's not. It's a normal part of development. It's trying to see what they have control over in their world. And between the ages of 2 and 4, really beautiful little thing happens where your child starts expressing emotion. Starting with the little I love yous, which just kind of make you turn into a little puddle outside their bedroom door when you say goodnight to them, which you could all be doing really soon if you're lying down with your kids at bedtime right now. That could all change. They start expressing emotion through play. So some of the strategies that we'll use if we're working together, will involve play during the day to get them on board for the changes that are going to happen with how they fall asleep and what happens throughout the night. I just want to reiterate, though, that the most important thing for your child developing healthy sleep habits is how they fall asleep. Back to those sleep props and rocking them in your arms, falling asleep with a soother, or lying down beside them, which is a big one at this age 4, 5. If they learn how to fall asleep on their own, which is completely possible within a week or two, it happens all the time with the families that I work with, they are very likely to just sleep through the night on their own within a week or two. Because remember, at the end of each sleep cycle, they flutter their little eyelashes open. And if there's no surprises, they'll just start a new sleep cycle because every cell in their body is telling them to continue to sleep. So if we take away the surprise factor, meaning they fall asleep independently. So when they flutter their eyelashes open independently and they find themselves in their own safe, secure beds in the middle of the night, that's not a surprise, and it doesn't cause them to wake up fully and seek out more help to get back to sleep. So really the only thing that we need to do is develop a program. We have a program, is to use a program that really teaches your child in a supportive way, in a gradual supportive way, how to fall asleep on their own and not using the props that they've been using for probably years. So why would you hire a sleep consultant? And when would you hire a sleep consultant? Not everybody needs one. For some people, just the tips in this webinar will be enough. But if you're feeling overwhelmed and exhausted, you're just done. Like a mom said to me on the phone the other night, she's like, you know what? Our first child was just easy, a piece of cake. We didn't even have to read a book. She just has been sleeping 12 hours straight since she was 3 months old. And they learned really quickly not to say that to other parents. Not very many babies sleep 12 hours straight at 3 months old. But their second child has been really challenging. And she's just like, you know what? I'm just tired. I'm just tired. I just am too tired to figure this out on my own and to do this on my own. If you feel like you're there, or you've just been sleep deprived for so long and you've tried a bunch of stuff, then that's a good time to have someone just give you a proven program and walk you through it and be with you for the whole 2 to 3 weeks that it takes to get consistent results. Okay. If your problems are too tough to solve with basic changes. So if you're, maybe the idea of putting your child to bed at 7 instead of 8 is going to make a massive difference to your child and solve all your problems, that's great. But if your problems are bigger than that, like they've never, ever fallen asleep on their own, or they wake several times throughout the night, In my books, once is too many. But if the problems are too big to solve with basic changes, then those are the kinds of things that I can help with. If you've tried stuff, okay, this is not your first foray into sleep help, and you've probably read lots of stuff and tried lots of stuff. But if you find you're just too tired at 2 o'clock in the morning when your child comes into your bedroom, or they call out to you and you're caving and just, oh, fine, get in the bed, kick me in the face, kick me in the ribs, I don't care, I just can't get out of bed anymore, I'm too tired. If that's happening, then someone holding you accountable and walking you through it and checking in with you every morning makes a huge difference. Also makes a huge difference if you and your partner are not necessarily on the same page or following the same ideas in the middle of the night. You have different capacities for doing it. Having a third party walk you both through the same plan and get you both on board. A lot of times that's why families will call me, because it just helps them get on the same page, follow the same program, and it takes away the debate in the middle of the night. There's a lot of outside the child's door debating in the middle of the night when your child's not sleeping very well, and it can come between you. So don't let that happen. These are solvable problems. And if you want it to go as quickly and easily and not trial and error your way through it, I can help you with that. So what I do with families like yours every day is when you decide, yeah, I'm done, I'm tired, I'm done trying stuff, let's do this. The first thing I do with families is get a questionnaire to get more information about your child, about their health, about their growth, about their activities, about their behavior. And it's not a lot of work. It's about 10 or 15 minutes to fill out, but it gives me a ton more information from which to draw up a plan. And then we sit down just like this on Zoom, and we'll do a 1-hour consult. It usually takes about an hour, sometimes a little bit more. When it's an older child and there's lots of strategies involved, daytime strategies and behavioral stuff. We'll talk through every single step: what to do at bedtime, what to do if this happens, what to do if that happens, what to do in the middle of the night, what to do in the early morning if they're waking up at 5:30, or heaven forbid 4:30. Those sorts of things, whether they need a nap, whether they don't. I follow an electronic sleep log of every single client I have to follow what's happening every day, real time, so that we can look for patterns. We can look for what is the ideal awake time. It can really help us figure that stuff out. So that's one of the things that I do to make sure that you stay on track, that your child has the right schedule, and that they meet their sleep goals. Usually takes about 3 weeks at this age, because there's a little bit of empowering and consistency to develop. So what I do is I check in with you daily, by phone, by email. By phone in the beginning, because I like to talk with families through the first few days. And then we check in by email at least every day. I answer every question along the way, because stuff comes up. It always comes up. It's like, what do I do if this happens? Now this is happening. This is new. Now that he's sleeping through the night, he's waking up at 5:30 every morning. What do we do about that? That sort of stuff we work through as we go along. And the reason why it's a 3-week program is because usually that's all it takes. And there's lots of families that are done and dusted in 12 days. And I'm not going to keep calling you and bugging you if that's the case, but I at least allow about 3 weeks, because that's oftentimes what it takes for an older child. And then, we can always have refreshers or quick questions that are, cheap and easy for years if you want. But usually with a child this age, once you establish really healthy sleep and they feel safe, secure, and empowered, which are always my goals with every family, you don't need a lot of support in the future. Okay, it's the families with babies that their children go through all the phases, toddler bed transitions and all that stuff that usually need some follow-up. But regardless, there's always follow-up options. So now I'm going to bring it back to a larger screen and answer your questions. So I'm going to open the chat. You can start asking questions in the chat box to the side. If you look on the bottom of your screen, there's a bar with a bunch of icons, and one of them is chat. You can open it up and start typing questions. I assume that's what's happening right now, because there's never no questions on these when it comes to child sleep. So Joy is asking if there's any tips for kids who go back and forth between 2 homes. Absolutely. I work with lots of families that are in 2-parent homes. I've even worked with a couple of families that have very different boundaries around sleep between one home and the other home. One of them was a very strained situation where there was very little to no communication between the parents, and it still worked out. So it is possible for, if both parents feel like this is an issue that needs to be solved and they're both on board, then we could do a Zoom meeting, dad in one house, mom in the other house, and me here, and we all talk through the same plan. I send you both copies of the plan, and I CC emails and talk to you both as we go along. But if that's not possible, because it's not always possible, and sometimes one parent wants to do this and the other doesn't, it is possible to have your child sleeping consistently, and work them through a supportive sleep plan in one house. In whatever happens at the other house that you have no control over, probably won't affect how they sleep at your house, because children really associate. A lot of times they'll sleep one way at grandma's and the other way at their house. They'll cuddle up in bed with grandma, but sleep is in their own bed in their own home. So children will often associate where the boundary is depending on whose house they're at. Okay, so but in order to to give you a very general tip on kids who go back and forth between the two homes, if it's possible, just communicate on the routine and the boundaries around sleep. If they stay in their own beds all night, that's kind of like the boundary at your house, and you've got a little digital clock that lights up, that's the cover over the minutes and just shows the hour, and your child gets out of bed at magic 7. They have to stay in bed until magic 7. That can help a child learn to sleep through the night. That alone can help a child learn to sleep through the night, because if they're waking up, they don't know what time it is, and it's 5:30 and it's light out, it might really help them to have that indicator. So if there's the same at both houses, if it's little things like that, if you have the same bedtime, have the same bedtime at both houses is a big one. Okay, so hopefully, Joy, that helps. But if you need to work on behaviors around sleep, whether your partner, the parent in the other home, is on board or not, it's still possible to do. Okay, Debbie, what's the best way to start removing yourself as the prop? Gradually, and with a proven plan. Okay, have a plan. So either with me or a plan that you already have. Just stick to it like glue. Okay. Just, you don't want to pull the rug out from under your child. That doesn't help them develop confidence and security. What helps them develop confidence and security is doing this at a pace that is proven to be at a pace that they can handle, so that they develop this sort of sense of, look at me, I'm doing this on my own, that intrinsic pride. So there's just too many strategies to go through in a 1 hour group thing, and definitely in a Q&A, because when I work with families with kids who have always laid down with a parent to fall asleep, it's a 3-week process, and we go through different strategies as we go along. There's an hour to an hour and a half, 1 hour consult on which strategies are appropriate for your child. I would love to wave the magic wand, but it usually takes a lot more one-on-one than that. But in general, gradually and in a supportive way. Allie. We've recently moved our 2.5-year-old into the toddler bed as he's climbing out of his crib. I know. Should we try to move him back into the crib or work on sleep in his bed? It is totally possible to work on sleep in a toddler bed, especially at 2.5. They've just reached that age where a lot of the preschooler strategies that I'll use to help them get on board and empower them around sleep, your child he's probably old enough to get this by now. That said, I have counseled a few families to move their child back to the crib, and instead take the mattress and lower it to the floor. So you take the platform out of the bottom of the crib, and so that the crib mattress sits on the floor, just as long as there is an overlap between the bottom of the crib rails and the top of the mattress, if that makes sense. So there's no space in between there. They can get their fingers or feet stuck. That usually ends up giving you about another 8 inches of mattress to crib rail height, and can stop kids from climbing out for another few months. So you can try that. Or if you need to work on sleep behaviors and sleep habits, we still can do it in a toddler bed. It usually just takes a little bit longer to get consistency, okay? But still completely possible. Joy, you're welcome. Joy says thanks. He's taking, so Ali also says that he's taking much longer to go down in the bed than in the crib. Oh yeah, because if that's the reason why I always tell families, if you've got sleep issues, solve them first before you switch to the toddler bed, because they've got this newfound freedom. And they're oftentimes, to a younger child at 2, 2.5, their bed is almost, to them, it's like continuous with the play space. So it doesn't really provide a firm enough boundary for the level of the development of their brain. So it can take longer. They can be a little jack in the box. So if he wasn't falling asleep independently and easily in a crib, that's usually, not always, but the vast majority of the time, it's exponential in a toddler bed. So you can go back to a crib if that's the case, and just lower the mattress all the way to the floor. Nada, I hope I'm saying your name right. Nada or Nita. Your 2-year-old baby girl cries and screams when she's put in her crib, and it never ends until I get her out. She won't go to sleep there. I'm so glad you just posted that question. Such a big one and so important to talk about. It looks so much like the child hates the crib. It always does, or the baby. But what they hate is that their prop isn't in the crib. If you're their prop, they're calling out for their prop. And I know you're their parent, and it's more complicated than that. But when it comes to sleep, there's no substitute for being able to fall asleep independently. It's a pathway we all developed as babies because we were put to sleep on our bellies. Our mothers had it way easier than us. You can tell them that next time they say this to you. But she's crying and screaming for her prop. And she's probably crying and screaming because she's tired and every cell in her body wants to sleep, and she needs her thing to help her get her to sleep. And that thing might be your shoulder or your arms or a soother or something. So I'm going to tell you a story. I worked with a family with a 2.5-year-old. She was almost 2.5, but she still had a crib. And her entire life, she had never fallen asleep on her own. She fell asleep in her parents' arms being rocked and sung to and breastfed, and then more rocking. And her parents were just in this, when they said by the time they called me, they were in a 1-hour bedtime routine of just rocking and singing and breastfeeding and rocking and singing and breastfeeding to get this 2-year-old to sleep. Because once they hit that age, they got more juice in them to fight it. So we worked together, and within a week, she was falling asleep in her crib and sleeping through the night. So they would put her in her crib asleep. She would wake up at midnight screaming her head off and be in the parents' bed on and off the breast for the rest of the night. And this family was broken. In their own words, they were broken. And they thought she just didn't have it in them. They thought that other families whose kids slept through the night, they just thought they had different kids. But that's not the case. She had it in her to do this too. Even that level of extreme. So we worked together. She was sleeping through the night within a week. She was consistent with it within 2 weeks. And then 6 months later, they told me this story, that they went on a vacation, and they were in a hotel room, and they ordered a toddler bed, or like a crib, a cot, for the hotel room for their daughter to sleep in, who was now 3 and had great sleep. And so no problem. She can sleep in a cot beside their bed. And she said, "Where's my bed?" And they said, "Well, this is your bed tonight, and we're in a hotel, and this is your cot." And she said, "No, I want one with bars." So we think that they hate their cribs. We project onto them that we're putting them in jail, but those are our ideas. Your child can learn to love their safe, little secure place. Okay? At an age of 2, they like a physical boundary is so much more secure for them in their little minds than an artificial boundary. So if she's crying and screaming when you put her in a crib, it's because she doesn't know how to fall asleep on her own. And that's something we can absolutely work through, Nada. Leah Kozak. Hi, Leah. Leah and I have worked together. 30-month-old son. Oh my gosh, that was a long time ago. He now wakes in the night for 2 to 4 hours, asks to come in your bed, now asks to sleep on the couch. Don't do that ever. Or on the floor. No longer wants to stay in his crib, but he goes to sleep fine in his crib. So this sounds like a split night, Leah, because I know he has great sleep and the ability to sleep. And so he is 2.5, very, very much in the throes of the boundary pushing age. So don't let your boundary move. Sleep is sleep. Daytime is daytime. If he's awake for 2 to 4 hours in the middle of the night, then he is having a split night. So he is either getting too much daytime sleep, his nap is too long. He could be early ready to drop the nap, but his nap is too long, or he doesn't have enough time between the end of his nap and going to bed at night. So he might need his nap to be capped. And I talked about that earlier in the webinar. Cap it at 45 minutes to an hour instead of a 2.5 hour nap. Push his bedtime half an hour later. Get him to build up more sleep pressure before he goes to bed, and then be really consistent about how you respond to him in the middle of the night when he does wake up. You don't sleep on the couch, and he doesn't come into your bed. He's too great. He's too good for that. So this is a phase. Kids will continue to go through phases. Some of you in this webinar might have had babies who slept great and have gone through a new phase of, oh my God, what is this waking up in the night thing? So regardless of how your issues started, there is a solution to it. But Leah, this sounds like it's a split night. So he needs more time awake before bed, or he needs less of a nap. If you can just write another comment about how long his naps are, or if he's still napping, okay? Julie says your 4.5-year-olds develop fears of the dark, ghosts, spiders, etc. Recently, these are affecting our sleep. Yeah, exactly. Right at the age where their imaginations start to do that and they're exposed to more media. So you definitely don't want to validate those fears. Okay, so sometimes parents will do monster spray in the bedroom to keep the monsters away. You're basically telling your children that monsters exist and this magic spray is going to stop them from attacking them in the night. So don't just say, yeah, man, only in our imagination. So introduce the idea of imagination so that your child understands that this is in their imagination, and don't like look under the bed to see that there's no spiders before they go to bed. Okay, that just tells them that it's possible that there could be spiders under your bed. There just happens to be none right now. You don't want to do that to your child. So you just want to say that you are safe and secure in your beautiful bed. Like, give them a little mantra. You can give them a little rubbing stone. These are some of the strategies that I use with older kids, like the 5 and ups. That, this is your little happy stone, your little rubbing stone. You get to rub it to fall asleep. And fears of the dark, you can put a nightlight in the hall. If you can, order one. We're all ordering everything online right now. No one's shopping anymore. But order one with a red light, red or orange. That light does not affect our brains or the melatonin in our brains like a white or blue light does. So you can give her a brand new nightlight. You can, don't validate the fears of, things being under her bed or anything like that. But she might need an earlier bedtime too. The biggest link between kids and nightmares is too late a bedtime. So they're overtired when they go to bed. That makes them more likely to have nightmares or to wake with nightmares. So try a slightly earlier bedtime, 20, 30 minutes earlier. Try really calm, sweet stories before bed. If you're already doing 2 stories, maybe this is an exception where you say, we do 3 stories now, so that she's got a longer calm down time. Give her a little mantra to say, things like that. Okay, I hope those help, Julie. But definitely, if it's really affecting her sleep in terms of her ability to fall asleep and stay asleep, then we might need to work more on that. There's a lot more strategies that we might need to employ, but I probably need to know a lot more and have more time to walk you through all of them. Teresa, do you work with multiple kids in one family at the same time, 2 separate programs at 2 different times? I do. So I'll often work with a family, because if one child is not sleeping well, chances are the other isn't either. So it often is the case that we'll need to work with 2 at one time. Here's the good news. You get 2 for the price of 1.5. So if we're working on 2 kids at the same time, you don't pay for 2 plans. And before anybody else needs to go, I will talk about my rates in a second, but you'll get 2 plans for the price of 1.5. So it is actually beneficial to work on both at the same time. That said, I usually start with the younger one first, and then a week or 2 later, once you start seeing success with the younger one, then we start working with the older one. Okay, it usually works better that way. And the programs can be different, because if one of the children is 2 or 18 months and the other child is 4 or 5, they're going to need different programs and they're going to need different strategies. So absolutely, Teresa. And I hope you'll either book a free call with me or just book right away to work together, because I'd be happy to do that. Allie, you're welcome. Allie says thank you. Percy, should we use the same techniques for naps and nighttime? You cuddle your 2.5-year-old for naps, but you're trying to put him down awake at night. Does this affect his learning? Yeah, it does. Because the most important thing for your child to develop independent, healthy sleep is consistency. And it's a confusing message to a child that age. Sometimes it's like this, and sometimes it's like this. That's the boundary thing. A child at this age their brains operate much better in black and white. So if it's black and white, it's always this way or it's always that way, that's easier for them to learn and it's easier for them to wrap their heads around. Naps are a little bit tougher because they have more oomph in them to fight it during the day than they do at bedtime, but it's absolutely possible for them to learn to sleep on their own, bedtime and nap time. The fact that you've already been working on it at bedtime is probably actually going to help. It's going to be in your favor. But I would say don't be scared about working on it. If you need help, please book a call with me, okay? Leah, naps are 2 to 2.5. Oh yeah, I asked Leah to put in how long it says. His naps are 2 to 2.5 hours. There you go. There's our culprit, Leah. So I would knock it back to an hour and a half and see if that changes it. So you would go into his room at about an hour and a quarter, maybe after an hour. Go into his room after an hour, open the blinds, turn on the lights, open the door, and then just start making more noise in the house so that when he comes to the end of his next natural sleep cycle, he'll wake up naturally rather than kind of jerk him out of a deep phase of sleep without realizing it. So if you can get him to nap an hour to an hour and a half and then maybe pushes bedtime 10 or 15 minutes later than usual, see if that ends the split night. And I have a feeling I feel like a year and a half ago or 2 years ago when we worked together, there was a little bit of this in the middle of us working together, and we had to get him through this. So it's really important how you address him as well in the middle of the night. Don't make any exceptions. No sleeping on the couch, no sleeping in your bed. Get him back to his really regular, great sleep. Teresa, will do. Okay, I look forward to talking to you, Teresa. And then Percy, you're welcome. So I'm going to wrap it up here, but before I do, I am taking $75 off my preschooler plans. So the toddler preschooler plans are usually $4.95, and that's the whole 3 weeks. That's everything mentioned there: phone calls, emails, me following your sleep log, the one-on-one consult for an hour, hour and a half, and working with you until you reach your sleep goals. I don't have a hard end date. I always work with families until they're done. Just so happens that usually takes 2 to 3 weeks. So if you want to work together, I'm going to send everybody who was on the webinar today a follow-up email with information about how to go ahead if you need help, because I'm here to help you. And there's never been a better time to do this work than right now, because we're not going anywhere. We don't have any activities. We don't have any evening plans. We're not traveling. So you'll never have a time where you're going to be more consistent. So it's really ideal to get your child sleeping well now, and you won't be sorry you did, because spending all day with your kids gets so much easier when you're well rested. I swear to you, it's actually fun. So I will send an email about how to go ahead, and my regular price of $4.95 to anyone who's on the webinar, I'm knocking it down to $4.20. So $75 off because we've gone through a lot of information already, and it's COVID time, and most people are feeling a little bit of a hit. But like I said, it's also consistent time, and it makes the challenge of being with our kids 24/7 way easier when we have that break in the evenings to ourselves, and we're not worried about whether our kids are going to wake up or how much sleep we're going to get. So I'm going to send you the information about how to work together if you need it. But otherwise, if you're going to just use some of the tips in this webinar, let me know. Let me know how it works out. I would love to hear an email from you anytime. Even if you're watching this on the replay, like 6 months from now, shoot me an email and say, I listened to your webinar and I tried this and it worked really well, because I love hearing those stories. It's why I do this. So thank you for joining, everyone. And I'll send you all an email. If you're on the webinar live, I will send you a follow-up email with how to contact me just to have another quick chat one-on-one, or to start working together as soon as possible. Take care, everyone, and sleep well.